Every year in the NBA, there are select players who earn awards for their efforts throughout the regular season. Honors such as MVP, Sixth Man of the Year, Most Improved Player, etc., etc. You kind of get what I'm saying. Now, when it comes to some of these awards, especially the MVP, they are highly controversial, largely due to the fact that there isn't any clear definition on who exactly should receive them on a year-to-year basis. Because of this, and I'm not saying that I don't look at MVPs by any stretch of the imagination, however, personally, I tend to hold way more value into the All-NBA and All-Defensive teams. And the huge reason why I do this is because A, there's more than just one player receiving an award, but B, and more importantly, it tends not to be as controversial and there isn't as many narratives that goes into selecting players who make the All-NBA team. And so for the past handful of years, that's how I've been really gauging who are some of the better players on a year-to-year basis. But recently I've noticed there is one massive problem. A problem that I do believe the NBA should address, largely due to its inconsistency throughout league's history. And to make matters worse, this inconsistency is not going away anytime soon and will continue to plague the NBA for the next several seasons. And furthermore, due to the formatting of the All-NBA and All-Defensive teams, it just doesn't rightfully depict the top 10 to 15 players in the NBA. And the problem in the formatting that I'm referring to is how the All-NBA and All-Defensive team is strictly based off of what position a player plays. But before we get into today's video, let me give a huge shout out to today's sponsors, and they are SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a platform that allows its users to buy tickets to all of the events that they want to attend. Regardless if it's a stand-up special, a concert, NFL, and obviously the NBA game, SeatGeek always has you covered with really good pricing, and it's super easy with their interface to trying to figure out what's the best ticket for you. And like I stated before, I've used SeatGeek multiple times. We're going to use them again before the season concludes to either watch the 76ers or the Milwaukee Bucks. I just got to figure out which tickets I'm going to go to, and whoa, why are the tickets to go see the Bucks so cheap? To make things even better, SeatGeek is giving all my first-time users a promo code for $20 off on their first purchase. And all you have to do is type in LOW for the promo code. And if that wasn't easy enough for you, all you have to do is click the link in the description. It will redirect you to the SeatGeek site itself so you can be ready and go pick up your tickets. And again, like always, thanks to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video. So first and foremost, I don't understand why there isn't a third All-Defensive team. They introduced a third All-NBA team back in 1988, and for whatever reason, they didn't follow it up with a third All-Defensive team, so that definitely needs to be fixed as soon as possible. But when it comes to the positioning, it's a massive problem, and again, an inconsistency that you can see throughout NBA history. A great example of the inconsistency that comes with positioning is Jimmy Butler. Last year, Jimmy Butler played a little bit of the shooting guard, but also the small forward position. However, many people would argue that he was a shooting guard, especially since he played right next to Andrew Wiggins. However, when it comes to him making the All-NBA and All-Defensive team, we see a massive level of inconsistency. Because on the All-NBA third team, he was selected as a forward, but when he made the second All-Defensive team, he was selected as a guard, which gives Jimmy Butler a huge advantage. Jimmy Butler, and due to his ability to play multiple wing spots, now has 12 opportunities to make an All-NBA team and has 8 opportunities to make an All-Defensive team. To put that in comparison with a player such as Rudy Gobert or Joel Embiid, who I would argue are just better players than Jimmy Butler, but they're only given 3 opportunities to make an All-NBA team and 2 opportunities to make an All-Defensive team because they are just centers, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The same thing can be said about point guards and other guards such as James Harden and DeMar DeRozan, who will simply only play the shooting guard position. So again, they're limited on the amount of opportunities that they're given to make an All-NBA team. And if we're already leaning more so towards an NBA that isn't heavily based off of positions, which I'm completely fine with, then the All-NBA and All-Defensive team should also duplicate that same level of representation. Now, the second problem is when you have players such as DeAndre Jordan, who's making All-NBA teams, not because they're one of the top 10 to 15 players in the NBA, but simply because of the position that he plays. And then on the other hand, you have players such as Kemba Walker or Mike Conley who receive limited All-NBA selections simply because of the era in which they play in. And so the problem isn't that James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Mike Conley, and now Kemba Walker aren't good enough players. The problem is that because they're point guards, there are only a limited amount of spaces on the team for them to be selected. And even though this year it isn't as problematic, moving forward for the next 2 to 3 years, this problem is only going to get bigger. Because at the guard position, we obviously have 3 names that will more than likely consistently make an All-NBA team, with Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and Steph Curry. After that, you have players such as Kyrie Irving and Damian Lillard, who more or less will continue to make the All-NBA team as well. So that's 5 spots already, and we only have 6 selections. And we haven't even talked about John Wall, Bradley Beal, Kemba Walker, Mike Conley, Ben Simmons, Donovan Mitchell. God forbid Trae Young in the next 2 years blows up and then he's in the conversation as well. So again, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever to leave them off the team, not because they're not good enough, but simply because, again, the position that they play in. Now, many people would combat that argument with, well, that's unfair to other players who play other positions. But in my opinion, I don't believe so. I believe in today's era, especially in the last 5 years, the best way to depict the better players in the NBA is just by allowing the point guards to be selected in the All-NBA team regardless of the positioning that they play in. Because again, those are the best players and the most impactful players in today's league. And quite frankly, this isn't just a right now problem. This is a problem that has been going on for the past several years now. A great example is dating back to the mid-2000s with Shawn Marion. For those out there who are unaware, Shawn Marion was actually an elite level defender. Many of you all may not be aware of this because he never made an all-defensive team. However, anyone who watched him play, you should already be aware that he was one of the better defenders in the NBA. And if you don't believe me, you can literally go back and look at some of the votings for the Defensive Player of the Year award. Such as in 2005, when the Defensive Player of the Year race, Shawn Marion finished in 5th place, and then in 2006, he finished in 7th place in the Defensive Player of the Year race. But for whatever reason, he still never made an all-defensive team. The reason for this is A, because they need to make a 3rd all-defensive team, but more importantly, due to the decade in which Shawn Marion played in, there were so many great forwards such as Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Andre Kirilenko, etc., that unfortunately Shawn Marion missed multiple opportunities to make the all-defensive team, in light of the fact that he was finishing as high as 5th in the Defensive Player of the Year race. But Shawn Marion isn't even the most egregious example. Dating back to the 90s, Patrick Ewing tended to be the one who received the short end of the stick when it comes to being selected to the All-NBA teams. A great example is what happened in 1994. The New York Knicks concluded a 57-win season. They had the #1 ranked defense, which was a reoccurring theme throughout the entire 90s, and they were poised to make an NBA Finals appearance. And many people will make the argument that Patrick Ewing was not only clearly the best player on the team, but one of the best players in the NBA, and for his effort and his level of play, he finished 5th in the MVP race. But yet somehow, someway, he does not make an All-NBA team, nor does he make an All-Defensive team. And it's not because he wasn't one of the top 5 to 10 players in the NBA, it was simply because players such as Hakeem Olajuwon, David Robinson, and Shaquille O'Neal were just better than him. And again, I just don't believe that is fair. You have a player such as Derek Coleman who's making the All-NBA team over Patrick Ewing, not because he's better than Big Pat, but simply because he's a forward and Ewing is a center. And so again, going back to my original comment about how point guards are the best representation of the players who are most impactful in today's league, the same thing can be said about the 90s. If there are just more centers who make the All-NBA team than there are of any other positions, well, that is the best representation and the best depiction of the players who were the most dominant and most impactful through the 90s. But in today's NBA, it's even worse because of the financial incentives to make an All-NBA team. This offseason may be the most talented free agency class we have ever seen in NBA history. And with the new CBA in place, players not only have incentives to stay on their team, but they obviously receive bonuses from making the All-NBA team as well. And so when we're talking about players, them trying to receive financial incentives, or even just them ending their career and not having enough on their resume to potentially not make the Hall of Fame, maybe I'm stretching it a little bit there because a lot of players make the Hall of Fame, but you kind of get what I'm saying here. Certain players' resumes and their impact in the game just isn't correctly depicted simply because of the position they play in. And I think that's a massive disservice that the NBA consistently does on a year in and year out basis. And if Adam Silver is watching this and you don't believe that all NBA teams should be positionless, please, at least for me, make a third all-defensive team. But with all that being said, people, please let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Just wanted to share my thoughts on something that I viewed as very problematic. And oh yes, before I go, huge shout out to today's sponsor, SeatGeek. Click the link in the description. And until next time, I will see you all later. Peace.